The clinking of silverware stops. The low murmur of conversation across the elegant dining room evaporates, or maybe it's just my world shrinking to this one point, this single terrible sound, the scrape of his chair as he pushes back from the table. It's our 10th anniversary. Candlelight flickers across the white tablecloth, warming the crystal, catching the gold band on my finger, the matching one on his. We're at La Petite Fleur, the place where he proposed. 10 years. A decade of laughter, of quiet mornings, of shared dreams whispered into the dark. He stands, and I smile up at him, expecting maybe a toast to the next 10 years, a cheesy, heartfelt sentiment. But his face. It's a mask I don't recognize. Cold. Distant. And the words that fall from his lips aren't a toast. They are shards of ice. I regret marrying you. The world doesn't just stop. It shatters. The sound of his voice, usually warm, familiar, is alien. My smile freezes, then crumbles.
I stare, utterly uncomprehending.
He just stands there, tall, imposing, a stranger under the soft restaurant lights. The air thickens, suffocating. Every eye feels like it's on us, even though I can't see anything but the terrifying blankness in his eyes. Regret? 10 years? Every memory, every shared moment, every sacrifice, every late-night talk. Reduced to regret? The word hangs in the air, heavier than granite. It steals the air from my lungs, leaving me gasping in the sudden, awful silence. The candlelight now feels less romantic and more like a harsh spotlight on the wreckage of my life. My hands tremor, reaching instinctively for the linen napkin, crushing it instead of using it. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He said it, out loud. Here.
Now.
On our anniversary. My husband. The man I built my life with. He regrets me. If this story hits close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life. Life before that night was a carefully curated canvas of contentment. We lived in a quiet neighborhood, tree-lined streets, white picket fences, the cliché of suburban bliss, and I loved it. Our house wasn't grand, but it was ours, filled with worn books, mismatched mugs that told stories of holidays and road trips, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee in the mornings. David worked in finance, a world I understood in broad strokes, numbers, markets, deals. I worked mostly from home, consulting, a flexible career that allowed me to manage our life, to be the quiet anchor to his sometimes turbulent professional seas. We had our routines, Sunday morning pancakes, evening walks when the weather was kind, movie nights curled up on the sofa. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were stresses, tired evenings, minor disagreements about where to put the new bookshelf, but it was real, it was ours, and I believed, truly believed, it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and deep, enduring love. We talked about the future like it was a map we were drawing together. Saving for a small cottage by the lake, planning hypothetical trips to far-off lands, debating names for children we hadn't even decided yet if we wanted. These weren't just fantasies. They felt like promises, gentle agreements woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. David could be quiet, sometimes withdrawn when work was particularly demanding, but he was also my best friend. He knew how I took my tea, the books I loved, the way I felt about rainy afternoons. He knew the silly little fears I had and the ambitious dreams I secretly harbored. I felt seen, truly seen, by him. I felt safe. Our life together felt like a warm, steady light in a chaotic world. That feeling of safety, that absolute trust, was the most precious thing I possessed. It was my everything. I remember the morning of our anniversary. He'd brought me coffee in bed, a rare treat. His eyes seemed a little distant, maybe tired. I'd attributed it to a big week at work. He kissed my forehead, wished me a happy anniversary, and then seemed preoccupied with his phone. I didn't think anything of it. Work was demanding. It often stole pieces of his attention. I spent the day preparing. I booked the table at La Petite Fleur weeks in advance, found the dress he'd always loved, spent too long doing my hair and makeup, wanting to feel beautiful for him, for us. The air in the restaurant was soft, filled with the murmur of happy diners, the clinking of glasses, the low, romantic hum of a piano somewhere in the background. He'd arrived slightly late, apologetic, citing a last-minute work call. He looked handsome in his suit, his tie slightly askew. We ordered wine, reminisced about our first date, our wedding day. It felt normal,
Happy even.
I felt a swell of affection, of gratitude for this life we'd built. And then he stood up. "I regret marrying you." The sentence echoed in the sudden, cavernous space in my chest. It didn't make sense. Regret? How could you regret 10 years? How could you regret us? My mind reeled, searching for context, for a hidden meaning, a terrible joke gone wrong. But his expression was devoid of humor, devoid of warmth, devoid of anything I recognized as the man I married. It was cold, sharp, final. I finally found my voice, a reedy whisper that sounded nothing like me.
What?
"What are you talking about, David?" He didn't soften. He didn't flinch. "It's over. I'm leaving." Leaving? Just like that? After 10 years? In a crowded restaurant? My humiliation was absolute, a physical weight pressing down on me. I looked around, seeing blurred faces turn, caught in the sudden drama unfolding at our table. The waiter who had just delivered our appetizers froze, a plate of oysters suspended in disbelief. The pianist faltered in his melody. The low hum of conversation died completely. Every single person in that room was a witness to the demolition of my life. "Why?" I whispered, the single word carrying the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. He finally looked directly at me, and in his eyes, I saw something shift. Not regret, not sadness, but calculation? A glint of something I couldn't place. It's not what I want anymore," he gestured vaguely, encompassing the restaurant, me, our life.
This.
"Any of it. I need something else." He didn't offer an explanation, an apology, a moment of shared history to soften the blow. He didn't acknowledge the decade we'd spent side by side. He simply stated his regret, his decision to leave, as if he were announcing a change in the weather. He turned, a swift, decisive movement, and walked away. He didn't look back. I sat there, frozen, surrounded by the ruins. The untouched appetizers, the flickering candle, the two place settings, perfectly arranged for a celebration that had just become awake. The silence in the restaurant stretched, unbearable. I could feel the heat rising in my face, a blush of shame, of hurt, of absolute bewilderment. The waiter, bless his heart, quietly, awkwardly, placed the oysters down and backed away, melting back into the shadows. Gathering what little dignity I had left, I managed to stand. My legs felt like lead. I fumbled with my purse, pulled out a credit card, and placed it firmly on the table.
I wouldn't let him leave me with the bill too.
Not tonight. Not ever. I walked out of the restaurant, past the now averted gazes of the other diners, past the stunned maitre d', into the cool night air. The city sounds seemed too loud, too vibrant, too alive for the dead stillness inside me. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything I thought was real. The days that followed were a blur of pain and confusion. The house felt vast and empty without him. His side of the bed was untouched, a stark reminder of his absence. I wandered through the rooms, touching things we'd picked out together. A painting from a trip, a worn armchair, the silly garden gnomes by the front path. Each object was a tiny dagger, a reminder of the life that had been so casually discarded. I called him, of course, repeatedly. My messages started heartbroken, pleading for an explanation, for a chance to understand, to fix whatever was broken. They became more frantic, then angry, then finally, just desperate silence. He didn't answer. He didn't text back. He simply vanished, leaving only the echo of his terrible words behind. My friends tried to help, offering comfort, casseroles, theories. Maybe it was a midlife crisis. Maybe he was overwhelmed at work. Maybe. Maybe he just fell out of love. That last one hurt the most. The idea that love, the thing I had believed was our unbreakable bond, could simply fade away, could become regret. But something felt wrong. It wasn't just the abruptness, the cruelty of the public declaration. It was his face. That cold, calculating look I had seen for just a moment. It gnawed at me. It didn't look like heartbreak. It looked like strategy. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to pick through the wreckage. Not just of my heart, but of our shared life. I started with the practicalities. The joint bank accounts. He'd moved most of the funds. Not illegally, not yet, but into accounts solely in his name. He'd set up new ones I didn't know about. He'd taken out a second mortgage on the house, our house, without my knowledge or consent, leveraging it against some investment. He hadn't just left me, he was trying to leave me with nothing. The why started to become clearer, and it was colder, harder, and infinitely more painful than just falling out of love. David wasn't just leaving me. He was trying to strip me of everything I had, everything we had built together. My consulting work, while flexible, wasn't insignificant. I had my own savings, inherited from my grandmother, which I had kept separate but available for emergencies or shared dreams like the lake cottage.
He knew about that money.
He knew about my small but growing business. He hadn't just regretted me. He had been planning this. Planning to sever our lives and take as much as he could with him. My confusion turned to a simmering anger. It wasn't just personal betrayal. It was a deliberate, calculated attack. He hadn't ended our marriage because he was unhappy. He had ended it because he saw an opportunity. An opportunity to use my assets, my work, my trust, to fuel his own ambitions. The sheer scale of his deception, the depth of the lies he must have been living while I was planning anniversary dinners, was staggering. He finally responded to an email, not with apology, but with demands. He wanted the house sold immediately, splitting the negligible equity after the new mortgage was paid. He wanted a settlement based on his skewed view of our joint assets, conveniently ignoring my contributions and attempting to claim a stake in my personal inheritance. His language was legalistic, cold, utterly devoid of any personal connection. He treated me like an opposing party in a hostile takeover, not the woman he had promised to cherish. This was the midpoint shift. The realization hardened something inside me. The heartbroken wife dissolved, replaced by a woman who was hurt, yes, deeply, fundamentally, but also furious and utterly determined. He thought I was weak. He thought I would fold. He thought he could just walk away with 10 years of my life and half of everything we'd earned, plus parts of things I had brought into the marriage myself. He thought wrong. He wanted a fight? I would give him one. But I wouldn't fight on his terms. I wouldn't fight with emotion, with tears, with pleas. I would fight with logic, with evidence, with cold, hard facts. I would fight smart. I hired a lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer, at first. I needed a forensic accountant, someone who understood complex financial maneuvers, hidden assets, leveraged debt. While David was making his demands, assuming I was cowering, I was quietly, methodically, gathering information. I started with the paper trail. David was meticulous in his work, but not at home. He left statements, emails, notes. I found encrypted files on his old laptop. I hired a specialist to access them. It turned out he had been planning this for months, maybe longer. Setting up shell corporations, transferring funds through convoluted paths, deliberately accumulating debt in my name, and leveraging assets he knew were technically joint, even if I rarely interacted with the details. His plan was simple: bankrupt me, take my personal savings and leave me with a debt and a decimated credit score, while he walked away clean, ready to use the stolen capital for his next venture. The deeper I dug, the sicker I felt. This wasn't a man who fell out of love. This was a predator. He hadn't just betrayed our marriage, he had attempted a hostile financial takeover of my entire future. The humiliation at the restaurant? That was just the opening salvo, designed to shatter me emotionally, make me compliant, easy to manipulate. He escalated his actions. He cut off my access to the joint checking account I still used for household expenses, leaving me scrambling. He tried to block access to our shared safety deposit box, where I kept important documents, including a small amount of jewelry inherited from my mother. He sent increasingly aggressive emails, threatening legal action if I didn't comply with his demands. He was confident. He believed he had me cornered, financially dependent, and emotionally broken. He underestimated me completely. I maintained my facade. When he called rare, usually only when he had a new demand, I sounded weary, defeated. I let him think his tactics were working. I spoke vaguely about just wanting it all to be over, about not having the energy to fight. I fed his arrogance. I let him believe he was winning. Meanwhile, my team worked tirelessly. The forensic accountant traced the money, identifying the shell companies, the fraudulent loans, the deliberate obfuscation. The lawyer gathered evidence of his duplicity, the dates of the financial maneuvers clearly predating the anniversary dinner incident, proving premeditation. They built a case not just for divorce, but for financial fraud, for attempting to defraud me of my assets, for leveraging joint property without consent. It wasn't just a divorce settlement anymore, it was potentially criminal. The weight of carrying the secret, of pretending to be broken while meticulously planning my counterstrike, was immense. There were nights I lay awake, the anger and hurt a hot, churning mess in my stomach. But the resolve never wavered. He had tried to destroy me. I wouldn't just survive. I would ensure he faced consequences. My turning point came the day my lawyer laid out the completed case. The evidence was irrefutable. His scheme was exposed, documented, undeniable. We had him. The question was how to deliver the blow. David was expecting a meeting. He'd set it up through his lawyer, insisting on discussing the final settlement terms. He wanted to do it at a restaurant, not La Petite Fleur, but another one, equally upscale, equally public. He liked control. He liked optics. He liked to project an image of calm, decisive power. He probably wanted to see me squirm, to see the defeat in my eyes as he dictated terms he thought I had no choice but to accept. My lawyer thought it was a bad idea, a potential emotional risk. I insisted. I knew exactly where I wanted this particular conversation to take place. The symbolism was necessary, and I knew how I wanted it to end. I chose the same table at La Petite Fleur where he had shattered my world. I called the maitre d', explaining the situation vaguely, asking for that specific table, citing sentimental reasons. He was hesitant but agreed. I arrived early, dressed simply but elegantly. I felt a strange calm. The frantic bird in my chest was still now, replaced by a cold, quiet certainty. David arrived, looking just as he had that night, suited, confident, a predatory glint in his eyes. He scanned the restaurant, a faint smile playing on his lips. He saw me, sitting alone at that table, and his smile widened. He probably thought I was there for sentimental reasons, hoping to appeal to some ghost of our past, desperate to salvage crumbs from the feast he'd stolen. He sat down opposite me, settling into his chair like a king on his throne. "You chose the location," he said, his voice low, smooth, utterly lacking in warmth. Trying to make a point, I met his gaze, keeping my face expressionless. Just seemed appropriate for a final discussion. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Yes, final. I believe my lawyer sent over the terms. They're more than fair, considering the circumstances." He leaned back, exuding confidence, entirely at ease in the space where he had publicly dismembered our marriage. He ordered a drink, scanned the menu as if he didn't have a care in the world. He talked about his future plans, dropping hints about big deals on the horizon, new ventures. He painted a picture of a successful, unfettered man, ready to conquer the world now that he had shed the dead weight of his past, meaning me. He spent a long time talking, circling around the financial settlement, reiterating his demands, explaining why he was entitled to what he was taking. He spoke about my personal inheritance as if it were a shared resource he had every right to access. He talked about the leveraged debt on the house, as if it were a minor detail I would easily manage. His arrogance was breathtaking. He didn't just think he had won. He thought he had outsmarted me, that I was too naive, too emotional, to ever see what he had done, let alone fight back. I listened, nodding occasionally, offering only brief, non-committal responses. I let him talk, let him gloat. I watched his face, looking for any flicker of doubt, any hint of remorse. There was none. Only smug self-satisfaction. The restaurant filled up around us. The soft music played. The clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the sounds of normal life, the sounds that had been silenced for me that night 10 years ago, were back. He was so focused on his victory speech, he didn't notice the subtle signals. I had arranged everything. I had spoken to the maitre d' again, given him instructions, handed him an envelope. I had timed it perfectly. He was mid-sentence, detailing how he would allow me to keep a fraction of my own savings when I saw the maitre d' approach our table, a polite, somber expression on his face. He carried a small, plain folder. Not a menu. Not the wine list. "Excuse me, madam," he said, his voice low and clear, addressing me, not David. "A delivery for you." David stopped talking, a look of irritation crossing his face. "A delivery? Here? Now," he snapped, annoyed by the interruption. I held out my hand. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady. The maitre d' placed the folder in my hands. It was heavy, thick. I didn't open it. Not yet. I looked at David, who was still frowning, waiting for the maitre d' to leave so he could resume his monologue. The maitre d' bowed slightly and withdrew. The air shifted again, just like it had that night. The soft sounds of the restaurant seemed to fade. The candlelight on the table felt brighter, more intense. David looked at the folder, then back at me, a question in his eyes. "What is that?" I finally opened the folder, my movements deliberate, slow. Inside were papers. Lots of them. Legal documents. Financial statements. Printed emails. I lifted the top page, a crisp, official-looking document. The words on it were clear, stark. "This," I said, my voice still low, but now carrying an edge of steel, "is a certified copy of a complaint filed this morning." David blinked. His smug expression wavered. "A complaint?
What are you talking about?"
"I told you. I'm not changing the terms." "Not those terms," I said, sliding the top page across the table towards him. "These terms." He picked up the page, his brow furrowed. He scanned the heading, the court name, the list of plaintiffs and defendants. He saw his name under defendant, he saw my name under plaintiff, then his eyes dropped to the body of the document. He read the first few lines, his face starting to pale. "Charges include," I read aloud, my voice gaining strength, echoing slightly in the sudden, expectant silence around us. "Financial fraud, attempted grand larceny, fraudulent conveyance, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a request for immediate freezing of all assets pending investigation, along with punitive damages exceeding the total value of the assets in question." He froze. Absolutely froze. His eyes, fixed on the document, widened in disbelief. The color drained from his face, leaving it a ghastly white. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The confident posture, the smug smile, all of it vanished in an instant, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. He hadn't expected this. He had expected me to argue, to beg, to maybe hire a standard divorce lawyer who would haggle over alimony and property division. He had expected me to be trapped by his financial maneuvers. He had expected me to be weak. But the papers in his hand weren't just divorce papers detailing the end of a marriage. They were the opening volley in a legal war based on criminal financial activity. They weren't his papers, dictating my surrender. They were my papers, initiating his downfall. He looked up from the document, his eyes wild, scanning my face, searching for the heartbroken woman he thought he knew. He found only a cool, unwavering gaze. The silence stretched, thick and heavy with the weight of the revelation. The waiter, discreetly refilling water glasses nearby, paused, his eyes flicking between us, sensing the seismic shift.
You
"You can't," David finally stammered, his voice rough, disbelieving. You don't have. How did you? While you were busy crafting your little scheme, I said, my voice steady, calm. I was busy finding out exactly what you were doing. And proving it, I gestured to the folder on the table. That's all in there. The shell companies. The forged documents. The fraudulent loans. Every single transaction you thought you'd hidden. His breath hitched. He looked like he was going to be sick. He glanced around the restaurant, suddenly aware of the quiet attention his reaction was drawing. The public spectacle he had created 10 years ago was now turning back on him, but this time he was the one exposed, the one blindsided. The server who just brought those papers, I added quietly, leaning forward slightly, my voice just loud enough for him to hear over the gentle restaurant hum. He wasn't just delivering mail. He's a process server. You've just been officially served. His hand holding the papers trembled.
He was trapped.
Here, in this restaurant, at this table, where he had thought he would deliver the final blow, he had received his own. His meticulous plan to leave me destitute had just backfired spectacularly, potentially costing him everything, including his freedom. I stood up, gathering my purse. I left the folder on the table, right where he had been confidently detailing my supposed surrender. Consider this my counterproposal, I said, my voice clear and strong. I didn't wait for his response. There was nothing left to say. I walked away from the table, from him, from the wreckage he had tried to leave me in. The air felt lighter this time. I walked out of La Petite Fleur not as the heartbroken wife, but as the woman who had faced betrayal, understood the game, and turned the tables with cold, decisive precision. Walking away from the restaurant, the cool night air felt cleansing. The weight I had carried for months, the pretense of defeat, the burden of his deception, lifted. It wasn't just relief, it was a profound sense of vindication. He had tried to erase me, to steal my past and my future. But I had refused to be erased. I had fought back, not with claws and tears, but with intellect and strategy. The fallout was swift and brutal for him. The freezing of his assets crippled his big deals instantly. The investigation into the fraudulent activity led to his partners distancing themselves, his reputation in the finance world crumbling. The divorce proceedings were no longer about negotiation, they were about restitution. My lawyer, armed with irrefutable evidence, ensured that not only were my assets protected and returned, but that he faced significant financial penalties. The legal process was long and emotionally draining, but the outcome was never in doubt. He tried to fight back, of course, attempting to discredit me, fabricating stories. But the paper trail, the meticulous documentation of his scheme, was undeniable. His arrogance had led him to believe he was invincible, that his lies were impenetrable. He forgot that paper trails don't have emotions, they just have facts. The house was eventually sold, the fraudulent mortgage dealt with. I didn't stay to watch it happen. I took only the things that were truly mine, the things that held genuine memories untainted by his betrayal, my grandmother's jewelry, the books I'd collected, the mismatched mugs. I found a small apartment downtown, a clean, bright space with large windows looking out over the city. It felt like a fresh start, a place where I could build something new, something entirely my own. There wasn't a moment of triumphant revelry. The victory was cold, born from pain and necessity. It wasn't sweet revenge, it was simply justice. It was the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming what was stolen, of refusing to be a victim. I learned a lot about people, about trust, about the hidden depths of cruelty. I learned that the person closest to you can sometimes be the greatest threat. But I also learned about my own strength. The quiet determination I found within myself, the ability to think clearly under immense pressure, to plan and execute a complex strategy even when my heart was breaking. Those were discoveries I wouldn't trade. The scar tissue remains. Trust isn't something I give easily anymore. The world feels a little sharper, less soft around the edges. But beneath the scar is a core of resilience, forged in the fire of betrayal. I am no longer defined by what happened to me, or by the man who tried to destroy me. I am defined by how I responded, by the strength I found when I had nothing left to lose. Sometimes, when I'm sitting in my new apartment, looking out at the city lights, I think about that night at La Petite Fleur. I remember the look on his face as he read the papers, the absolute shock of realizing his carefully constructed plan had imploded. It's not a memory I savor with glee, but with a quiet, steely resolve. He thought he could break me. He only made me stronger. He regretted marrying me. But I don't regret walking away, papers in hand, into my own future. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear a version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.